The morning air was cold, and the sky looked gray. People walked quickly along the sidewalk, some with coffee in hand, some talking on their phones, and some not looking at anyone at all. On that busy street in New York City, no one noticed the small boy sitting near the wall of a building. He looked about 10 years old, thin, quiet, and still. He wore a hoodie that was 2 sizes too big and shoes that had holes near the toes. His hands were red from the cold, but he didn't complain. He didn't speak. He just sat there, holding a small cardboard sign that said, "I'm hungry, please help." He wasn't loud. He didn't beg like some people did. He didn't shout or run after people asking for money. He just sat there and watched. His eyes looked tired, but not angry. He watched every person who walked past him, hoping someone would stop. Many didn't even see him, or at least acted like they didn't. A few looked at him for a second and then looked away. Some seemed sorry, but they kept walking. No one stopped then. Something changed. A black SUV stopped by the side of the street. A woman stepped out. She wore sunglasses and a long brown coat. Her hair was tied back neatly. She looked calm and graceful. She walked into a nearby cafe. A few people on the street turned their heads to look at her. Some whispered to each other, "That's Sandra Bullock." But she didn't look around. She just walked into the cafe. The boy didn't know who she was. He only looked at the cafe door as it slowly closed behind her. A few minutes later, she came out holding 2 cups of coffee, one in each hand. She walked down the street, took a sip from her cup, and then stopped. She had seen the boy. For a moment, she just stood there and looked at him. The boy looked up, but he didn't speak. He was used to people staring and walking away, but she didn't walk away. She stepped closer and bent down in front of him. Her voice was soft as she said, "Are you okay?" The boy looked at her, unsure how to answer. He wasn't sure if she really wanted to know, but something about her eyes made him feel safe. He nodded slowly, then shook his head. He didn't know what to say. She offered him the second cup of coffee. He took it carefully with both hands, as if it was made of glass. He looked at her again and asked, "Can I have $1 instead?" Her eyebrows lifted a little, not in anger, but in surprise. She asked, "Why do you need $1?" The boy looked down and said, "To buy bread for my sister." The street around them was still busy. People were walking, cars were honking, and music played from a shop nearby. But in that moment, everything felt quiet. Sandra looked at him closely. Her heart was already touched, but now she felt something stronger. She reached into her purse and took out her wallet. She didn't give him just $1. She gave him a few bills, not saying how much, and gently placed them in his hand. "Where are your parents?" she asked. He paused, looked down again and said, "My mom died last year. My dad left after that." His voice was calm, but those words hit her hard. He wasn't crying, but she could feel the sadness in every word he said. "It's just me and my sister now," he added softly. "She's younger than me. I take care of her." Sandra didn't know what to say. She felt a lump in her throat. She sat down beside him for a moment, forgetting that she was a famous actress and people might be watching. She didn't care. She wanted to know more. But before she could ask another question, someone from her team came out of the cafe, calling her name, reminding her about her next meeting. She looked back at the boy and said, "What's your name?" He told her, and she quickly took a pen from her bag and wrote it on a napkin. She said gently, "I'll try to help you, okay?" He nodded, holding the coffee in one hand and the money in the other. Then, as quietly as she had arrived, she walked away, but her mind stayed with the boy. She kept thinking about his small voice, his simple request, and the way he sat still on that cold street. Something about him felt different. She had met many people, seen many things, but this moment was something she could not forget. As she stepped into her SUV and drove away, she didn't notice that someone else had been watching from a distance. Someone who had seen everything from across the street. That person was Keanu Reeves. He hadn't planned to get involved, but what he had just seen planted a seed in his mind. A seed that would grow into something no one expected. Sandra sat quietly in the car as it moved through the busy streets. But her mind was not in the car anymore. Her eyes looked out the window, but she was still thinking about the little boy. His words kept repeating in her mind. Can I have $1? Instead, to buy bread for my sister. She had seen many things in her life, met many people, heard many stories, but there was something about this boy. Something simple, honest, and real. She had only talked to him for a few minutes, yet it felt like she had known him longer. His face was still in her mind, the way he held that cup of coffee with both hands, the way he spoke softly and didn't ask for more than he needed. She looked down at the napkin in her hand. She had written his name there, even though she wasn't sure why. Maybe she wanted to remember him. Maybe she wanted to do something more than just give money and walk away. She folded the napkin and put it in her pocket. She had work to do that day. Meetings, phone calls, scripts to read. But none of it felt important right now. Back on the street, the little boy stood up slowly. He looked at the money Sandra gave him. It was more than enough to buy bread. He counted it carefully, then looked across the road where a small bakery stood. He crossed the street, entered the bakery, and used part of the money to buy a loaf of bread and a bottle of milk. The woman behind the counter smiled kindly. She had seen him before, but this was the first time he had come in with money. Holding the food close to his chest, he walked through the narrow streets. He turned into an alleyway, stepped over a broken crate, and quietly called out, "Maya?" A small girl peeked out from behind a pile of boxes. She looked younger than him, maybe 6 years old. Her hair was messy, and her clothes were too thin for the cold weather. But when she saw her brother, her face lit up with a big smile. He sat beside her and gave her the bread. "Eat slowly," he said. "We have milk too." She smiled again, took the bread in both hands, and started eating happily. For them, this was a feast. This was a lucky day. She didn't ask where the food came from. She trusted her brother. He always found a way. Even when there was nothing, they sat together in silence, sharing the bread and milk, trying to stay warm behind the large garbage bin that hid them from the street. The boy told her about the kind lady who gave him coffee and money. "She was nice," he said. "She looked like someone from a movie." The girl laughed and asked, "Was she a queen?" He smiled and nodded. Maybe, at the same time, not far away. Keanu Reeves was still in the area. He had just finished a meeting nearby and was standing near his car, waiting. His driver stood a few steps away. Looking at his phone, Keanu had noticed the woman earlier, the one who knelt down beside the boy. At first, he didn't think much of it, but the way she talked to the child, the way she gave him her full attention, had caught his eye. He recognized her, of course everyone did. Sandra Bullock was not just a famous actress. She was someone people respected. But what impressed him more was how she spoke to the boy like he mattered, like he was not just someone on the street, but someone important. Keanu's eyes followed the boy as he walked away. He didn't know why he was still watching. He told himself it was just curiosity, but deep inside, he felt something. A strange feeling he hadn't felt in a while. Something between concern and responsibility. He turned to his driver and said, "Can you follow that kid for a bit?" The driver looked surprised but nodded. "Sure, sir. Want me to stay far back?" Keanu nodded. "Yes, don't scare him. Just see where he goes." As the car slowly followed the boy from a distance, Keanu watched from the back seat. He didn't know what he would find, but he wanted to know. He wanted to be sure that the boy was okay, that he wasn't lying, not because he didn't trust him, but because he hoped he wasn't in more danger than he looked the driver turned into. The alleyway a few minutes later stopped the car and pointed, "There, sir." Keanu looked out the window and saw them. The boy and his sister, sitting behind a dumpster, eating bread like it was the best meal in the world. They looked cold, but they were smiling. They had no roof, no bed, no warmth, but they had each other. Keanu's face became serious. His hands tightened into fists slowly. No child should live like this, he said under his breath. He didn't say anything else for a while. He just kept watching, something stirring deep inside him. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to make a decision that would change not just the children's lives, but his own too. The boy sat beside his little sister as she finished the last piece of bread. He gave her the rest of the milk and watched her drink with a smile. For a few minutes, everything felt calm. They were still sitting behind the dumpster, still surrounded by trash and cold walls. But in that small moment, they felt safe. They felt like things would be okay, even if just for a little while. The boy leaned back against the wall and looked up at the sky. It was starting to get dark. He knew they had to sleep soon. He pulled out a thin blanket from behind the boxes and wrapped it around his sister. She looked up at him and asked, "Do you think we'll get a home one day?" The boy smiled but didn't answer. He didn't want to lie. And he didn't know the truth suddenly. He heard something, a quiet sound like footsteps. He looked around but didn't see anyone. He didn't know that someone was nearby watching them. It was Keanu Reeves. He had gotten out of the car and was standing at a corner, far enough not to be seen, but close enough to see everything. His heart was heavy. He saw the small blanket, the broken boxes, the way the boy kept his sister warm with his own body. It was clear they had no home, no family, no safety. Keanu couldn't move for a while. He just stood there, frozen. Something inside him had changed. The moment he saw those two kids, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a deep sense of purpose. He walked back to his car and sat in silence. The driver looked at him and asked, "Should we do something?" "Sir?" Keanu didn't reply right away. Then he said, "Yes, we're going to help them." But quietly, no media, no photos, nothing public. The driver nodded. Understood. That night, Keanu made a few phone calls. He called someone he trusted, a woman who worked with children and ran a private shelter. She was kind, smart, and didn't like attention either. He told her everything. She listened carefully and said, "Bring them to me. I'll take care of them. I promise." The next morning, Keanu returned to that alleyway. This time, he wasn't alone. The woman from the shelter was with him, along with a small team. They carried blankets, warm food, and soft clothes for the children. Keanu stayed back again. He didn't want to scare the kids. The woman approached slowly, smiling gently. The boy saw her first. He stood up quickly, blocking his sister with his arms. His eyes were full of fear. The woman spoke softly. "It's okay, we're here to help. A kind man saw you yesterday and wanted to make sure you're safe." The boy didn't move. But he didn't run either. She opened the food bag and placed it on the ground. She also showed him the clothes. "You don't have to come with us," she said, "but it's warm there. You can shower, sleep in a bed, and eat as much as you want." The boy looked at his sister, who peeked out from behind him. Her eyes widened at the smell of the food. He asked, "Do we have to pay?" The woman shook her head. "No, it's free. Someone kind already paid for everything." The boy was still unsure, but his sister tugged at his shirt and whispered, "Please, can we go?" He looked at her for a long second, then nodded slowly. They followed the team to the van parked nearby. Before getting in, the boy turned around and looked at the alley one last time. It had been their home for months, ugly and cold, but still theirs. Now they were leaving it behind, maybe forever, from a distance. Keanu watched the van drive away. His heart felt lighter, but also full. He had done something good, not for fame, not for thanks, but just because it was right. He didn't tell anyone. Not his friends, not the press, not even his manager. Only he and the small team knew that night. The children arrived at the shelter. They were given warm showers, clean clothes, and soft beds. The girl laughed for the first time in days. The boy stayed quiet, still watching everything, still unsure if this was real. But when he saw his sister sleeping peacefully under a real blanket, he smiled a little. The next day, the woman who ran the shelter told the boy something. "You're safe now. You don't have to worry about food or cold. You can stay as long as you need, and one day, If you want, you can go to school again." The boy's eyes filled with tears, but he quickly wiped them away. Somewhere across the city, Keanu sat in his apartment, looking out the window. He wasn't thinking about his next movie or his next script. He was thinking about two children who now had a bed, warm food, and maybe, just maybe, a chance at life again. 2 days passed. The boy and his little sister were slowly getting used to the shelter. It wasn't easy for them to trust new people. But the warm food, clean clothes, and soft beds helped. Every time the little girl smiled, the boy felt like he could breathe again. For so long, he had been afraid every single day, afraid of hunger, cold, and strangers, but now for the first time in months, he could sleep without worry. The woman who ran the shelter, Miss Grace, was kind and patient. She never asked too many questions. She spoke slowly and gently, giving the children space to feel safe. She knew their hearts needed time to heal. Every morning, she would bring them breakfast and sit with them for a while. The little girl had already started calling her auntie, but the boy was different. He still watched everything. He didn't smile much, and he didn't speak unless he had to. One morning, Miss Grace sat beside him and said, "I know someone who helped bring you here. He's the reason you and your sister are safe now. Do you want to meet him?" The boy looked at her with curious eyes. "Who is he?" he asked quietly. She smiled. "Someone very kind, someone who wants nothing from you, just to see you happy." That afternoon, a black car stopped outside the shelter. The staff quietly opened the gate, and a tall man stepped out. He wore a simple black jacket and jeans. His face was calm, and his eyes were gentle. It was Keanu Reeves. He had come without cameras, without security, just as a normal man. The children didn't know who he was. They didn't recognize him from the movies. To them, he was just a stranger. But the moment Keanu saw the boy and his sister standing in the hallway, his heart softened. He gave a small smile and said, "Hi, I'm Keanu. I think we've almost met before." The boy didn't reply, but he looked at him carefully, trying to understand. Miss Grace stepped in and said, "He's the one who saw you behind the dumpster. He made sure you were brought here." The boy's eyes widened, and he took a small step back. He wasn't afraid, he was just surprised. Keanu knelt down, so he was at eye level with the children. He reached into his pocket and took out 2 small chocolate bars. "I brought something sweet, if that's okay." The little girl stepped forward and took one with a smile. The boy hesitated, but then slowly took the other. They sat together in the common room. The TV was off, and the key was off, and that slowly took the other. They sat together in the common room. The TV was off, and the TV was off. Room was quiet. Keanu didn't ask many questions, he just listened. He talked about simple things, how he liked motorcycles, how he once got lost in a city, how he used to feel lonely sometimes too. He didn't talk like a rich man or a famous star. He talked like a friend. The boy slowly opened up. He told Keanu how they used to live with their mom in a small apartment, how she used to sing lullabies at night. Then one day, she didn't wake up. After that, their dad disappeared, and everything changed. "I tried to take care of my sister," he said, "but it was really hard." Keanu nodded slowly. "You did something very brave," he said. "You didn't give up, you kept her safe. That's what a real hero does." The boy looked down, but a small smile touched his lips. No one had ever called him a hero before. Miss Grace watched from the doorway, her heart full. She had seen many children come through her shelter, but something about this meeting felt different. There was something deep and real in the way Keanu spoke to the kids. He wasn't just helping with money, he was giving them time, respect, and kindness before leaving. Keanu gave Miss Grace a quiet message. "I'll cover all their needs," he said. "Clothes, food, school, everything. Just let me know. But don't tell the press, please." She nodded, already knowing he meant it. He also asked if he could visit the children again, not often, just sometimes, to check on them. Miss Grace said yes. That night after dinner, the little girl asked her brother, "Do you think he's a superhero?" The boy thought for a moment and then whispered, Maybe, but a quiet one. They both laughed softly and curled under the blanket. Feeling safer than ever before, in another part of the city, Keanu sat in his quiet apartment. He looked out the window at the stars and thought about the two children. He didn't want praise. He didn't want the world to know. He just felt something inside him shift, something that reminded him that small kindness can change big lives, and he knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. Days turned into weeks. The little boy and his sister were slowly getting used to their new life. They now had regular meals, warm beds, and friendly people around them. They were no longer afraid of cold nights or going to sleep hungry. Every morning, the boy would wake up early, help his sister get ready, and sit with her during breakfast. He still didn't talk much, but his eyes looked brighter than before one afternoon. Miss Gray sat down with the boy and showed him a small folder. Inside were school papers. "It's time to start school," she said gently. The boy looked unsure. He hadn't gone to school in a long time. He was worried he wouldn't understand anything, but Miss Gray said, "You're smart, you'll catch up. And your sister will start too. She'll be in the class for little kids." That same day, Keanu came to visit again. The children smiled when they saw him walk through the door. He brought them books and a new backpack for each of them. "These are for school," he said. "You're going to do great." The boy opened the bag slowly, looking at the fresh notebooks and pencils inside. He touched them like they were treasures. The little girl hugged Keanu without a word. Her small arms wrapped around him tightly. Keanu smiled and gently patted her back. Then he looked at the boy and said, "You know, I wasn't good at school either, but I tried, and you should too." The boy smiled shyly. "Okay, I'll try." He said the next week they started school. It was strange at first. The other kids didn't know their story. But the teachers were kind and patient. The little girl made friends quickly. She laughed and played during break time. But the boy stayed quiet. He didn't talk much. But he listened and learned. Slowly, he began to enjoy being in the classroom. Again, Keanu continued to visit them once in a while, never with a camera, never with reporters. He sat with them, asked about their day, and sometimes brought ice cream. One day, he even helped the boy with a science project. They used cardboard and old bottle caps to build a model of the solar system. The boy was proud when he showed it to his teacher, but there was one thing the children didn't know. Keanu was doing much more than visiting. Behind the scenes, he was helping Miss Grace improve the shelter. He donated books, clothes, toys, and even helped build a small library inside. He also spoke with doctors and made sure that children got health checkups, dental care, and anything else they needed. When someone asked him why he was doing all this, Keanu simply said, "Because someone has to." He didn't want credit. He didn't want his name on any wall. He just wanted the children to have what they deserved, a chance to live without fear. One evening, after dinner at the shelter, the boy sat alone outside, looking at the sky. Keanu came and sat beside him. They didn't talk for a few minutes. Just sat quietly. Then the boy said, "Why did you help us?" Keanu looked at him and answered softly, "Because I saw you. I saw how you took care of your sister, and how strong you were, even when you had nothing. That kind of love is rare." "You reminded me of something I forgot," the boy asked. "Do you have kids?" Keanu shook his head slowly. "No, but I think if I ever did, I'd want them to be kind like you." The boy looked down, trying not to cry. He wasn't used to hearing kind words like that. The next day, something happened at school. A boy in the class teased him and called him the homeless kid. The boy didn't fight. He stayed quiet, but his face turned red with shame. That evening, he didn't talk much. Even to his sister, when Keanu came to visit the next week, Miss Grace told him what had happened. Keanu sat down with the boy and said, "People will always say things, but their words don't define you. What matters is who you are, and you're someone strong, smart, and brave." The boy nodded slowly, feeling a little better as the weeks went on. The children's lives began to bloom. The girl learned to read quickly, and the boy started writing stories in his notebook. One day, He wrote a short story about a boy who had nothing but never gave up. Miss Grace read it and smiled. "You're going to be a writer," she said. The boy shrugged. "Maybe," he replied, but inside, he felt hope. Keanu kept helping quietly, never expecting anything in return. For him, the children were not just two faces from the street. They were a reminder that even small acts of kindness could grow into something powerful. And though no one saw it, a bond had formed between a silent man and two forgotten children. A bond that would last forever. The days grew warmer, and flowers started blooming in the small garden near the shelter. The little girl loved to pick wildflowers and give them to Miss Grace. The boy, now more open than before, began helping other children at the shelter. He showed them how to share food, how to fold blankets, and how to stay quiet at night so everyone could sleep. Miss Grace often watched him from the kitchen window. Her heart would fill with pride. He was no longer just a scared child hiding behind a dumpster. He was becoming a young man with a kind heart and a calm strength. She knew this change was not just because of food and safety. It was because of love, quiet, strong love from people who didn't walk away. Keanu still visited from time to time, but always quietly. He never told the children when he would come. Sometimes he brought books, sometimes toys, but mostly he just brought himself, and that was enough. The children waited for him with smiles. They trusted him, not because he was famous, but because he had never broken a promise. One afternoon, Keanu came with something special. He had a small box with him. Inside were two small lockets, one for the girl, one for the boy. Each locket had a tiny photo inside. One side had a picture of the kids together. The other had a small note. "You are loved, never forget." The girl wore hers around her neck every day. She showed it to her friends at school. The boy kept his inside his backpack. He didn't tell anyone, but sometimes during lunch break, he would open it and look at the words. They gave him courage. One evening, after homework, the boy sat with Keanu on the shelter's rooftop. They watched the city lights together. The boy asked, "Do you ever get tired of helping people?" Keanu smiled softly and said, "Sometimes I get tired, yes, but never tired of helping. Helping you gives my life meaning." The boy was quiet for a moment, then said, "I want to help people too, one day like you." Keanu looked at him with proud eyes. "You already are," he said. "You helped your sister when you had nothing. That's something most adults can't do." Later that week, something surprising happened. A local community center invited the shelter kids to a small talent show. Miss Grace encouraged everyone to join. At first the boy said no. He didn't think he had any talent, but his sister begged him, "Please, tell your story, the one you wrote." He thought about it for a night, then said yes. On the day of the show, he stood on stage, holding a small paper and shaking hands. He looked at the small crowd, his heart beating fast. Then he began reading his story, a story about two children who lived in the dark, but found light through kindness. His voice trembled at first, but as he read, it grew stronger. The room was silent as he spoke, and when he finished, people clapped. Not just politely, but with real feeling. Miss Grace wiped her tears, and Keanu, sitting in the back, smiled with pride. The boy stepped down, his face red, but his heart full. For the first time, he felt seen, not as a homeless child, but as a storyteller. After the show, a local teacher came up to Miss Grace and said, "He has something special. We should help him grow this gift." Miss Grace nodded. "We will," she said, "with every chance we get." Over the next few weeks, the boy joined a writing class on weekends, funded quietly by Keanu. He loved it. He learned how to shape his stories, how to use his voice. His teachers said he had deep emotion in his writing, something rare for his ages. Sister continued to shine in school too. She made many friends and started drawing little pictures of their new life: flowers, warm beds, smiling faces, and sometimes a tall man in a black jacket, always smiling, always kind at the shelter. The kids began calling Keanu Uncle K. They didn't know he was a movie star. To them, he was the man who showed up when things got hard, who listened without judgment, who cared without asking for thanks. One day, while walking through the shelter garden, the boy stopped Keanu and said, "I think I know what I want to be when I grow up." Keanu smiled and asked, "What's that?" The boy looked up and said, "A helper, like you." Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder and replied, "Then the world will be lucky to have you." That night, the boy wrote a new story. It was called The Man in the Black Jacket. It was about a quiet man who found two lost stars and helped them shine again. He folded the paper and placed it beside his pillow, dreaming of the day when he could share it with the world. And so, without fame, without cameras, without noise, something beautiful was growing. A child once forgotten was now dreaming, because someone had chosen to care. 1 year had passed since that cold morning on the sidewalk. A lot had changed since then. The boy and his little sister were no longer homeless, no longer afraid of sleeping in the dark or eating from garbage bins. They now lived in a small foster home arranged by Miss Grace. The home was quiet, clean, and filled with books, toys, and kind people. They still visited the shelter sometimes to say hello or help with chores. The boy had become someone the younger kids looked up to. He helped them with schoolwork, told bedtime stories, and made sure no one felt alone. His sister was always by his side, holding his hand, smiling brightly. Her laughter had returned, soft and full of joy. Keanu still visited quietly, not as a guest but like family. He never came with cameras or reporters. He came with books, cookies, or sometimes just to sit and listen. He never made big speeches, but his presence brought calm. The children loved him because he never made them feel small. One afternoon, Miss Grace received a phone call. A big magazine wanted to write a story about the shelter. They had heard whispers about a famous man helping kids in secret. Miss Grace politely said no. She knew Keanu would not want it. This story was not about fame. It was about kindness, but news still spreads, even if quietly. People in the neighborhood began to talk about the two children who had once lived on the streets and were now doing well. Teachers praised the boy for his storytelling and the girl for her drawings. No one knew the full truth, and that was fine at school. The boy was asked to write a short speech for a special day called Kindness Day. He was nervous. He didn't like standing in front of people, but his sister squeezed his hand and said, "You can do it. I'll be in the front row." He stayed up late writing the speech. He didn't use big words or long sentences. He wrote from the heart. He spoke about cold nights, about how a cup of coffee and kind words from a stranger gave him hope. He didn't name anyone, but the message was clear. Kindness had saved him. On the day of the speech, he stood on stage, holding his paper tightly. He looked at the crowd, took a deep breath, and began to read. His voice was steady, clear, and full of feeling. He didn't cry, but many people in the audience did. When he finished, the whole room stood up and clapped. His sister clapped the loudest. And Keanu, sitting quietly in the back, felt tears in his eyes. He wasn't a man who cried easily, but that moment touched something deep inside him. After the speech, a teacher came to the boy and said, "Have you ever thought about writing a book?" The boy looked surprised. "A book?" he asked. The teacher smiled. "Yes, your stories have power. You should share them." That night, the boy wrote a new story. It was about a shadow that followed a child everywhere, whispering doubt and fear. But one day, a quiet man gave the child a flashlight, and the shadow disappeared. The story was short but powerful. Miss Grace read it and whispered, "This will help so many." Later that week, Keanu invited the boy to a small bookstore. The two of them walked through shelves of books, touching the covers, reading the titles. Keanu picked up a notebook and handed it to him. "Start here," he said. "Every great writer begins with a blank page." The boy smiled and took the notebook like it was gold. He didn't say much, but Keanu understood. Some things don't need words. Meanwhile, the little girl had her own dream. She wanted to become an artist. She had already filled 3 sketchbooks with drawings: trees, stars, people hugging, and a man with kind eyes and a black jacket. One day, Miss Grace showed her drawings to a friend who owned a small gallery. The friend was so touched that she offered to display them, so two children who were once invisible were now becoming something more, one with a pen, the other with colors. They were not just surviving anymore. They were beginning to shine, but still, no one in the world knew what Keanu had done. No one wrote about it. No news channels reported it. And that's exactly how he wanted it. He wasn't looking for applause. He was simply doing what he believed was right. Sometimes at night, he would sit by the window in his quiet home and think about those two kids. He didn't see himself as a hero. He just saw himself as lucky for having met them, for having been given the chance to help, and for having been reminded that love is the greatest gift of all. And so the story, though hidden from the world, kept growing in the hearts of those who lived it.